Mirren, this marriage is over. Sign the papers and be gone by morning. Ambrose Darrow, 43-year-old founder and CEO of Darrow Collective, said it in the marble foyer of Caldwell House, while his mother stood at the landing above like a woman who had rehearsed this moment for years. In his right hand was a courier envelope. Beside him stood Marvella Darrow, 66-year-old matriarch of the Darrow family and controlling trustee of Caldwell House estate, with Mirren's key fob sitting in her open palm like she had already begun the inventory. Maren Cole Darrow, 37, wife of 9 years, stood with one carry-on bag near the door and rain moving against the tall windows. She had spent nearly a decade making Caldwell housework, softening vendor disputes before they became lawsuits, covering payroll gaps through private accounts when the company stretched too thin, reviewing contracts Ambrose signed without reading, and quietly dismantling the disasters that would have carried his name to the wrong kind of headlines. Tonight, none of that was mentioned. Tindra Wace, 30, Darrow Collective's creative director and Ambrose's other life, descended the staircase wearing the pearl and gold brooch Mirren had inherited from her grandmother. She touched the piece lightly, as though it had always belonged to her. Some women are placeholders, Tindra said, her voice just warm enough to sound almost kind. The smart ones know when to move aside. Maren looked at Ambrose. He looked at the floor. That was her answer. He said, "Don't make this a performance, Mirren. You'll only look worse." She did not scream. She did not beg. She only looked at the key fob in Marvella's hand, at the brooch on Tindra's collar, and at the man she had spent 9 years trying to protect from the consequences of his own decisions. Then she picked up her bag. What Ambrose did not know, had never bothered to know, was that the 4 flagship showrooms housing Darrow Collective's retail operations, the properties whose addresses appeared on every invoice, every press release, and every investor pitch deck he had ever distributed, were sitting on land owned by Cole Property Trust, Mirren's trust, her father's structure, transferred to her as sole beneficiary 2 years before she and Ambrose ever met. Garner Cole, 71 at the time of his death, and the man most of the city still associated with quiet, generational wealth, had built his fortune through commercial real estate before anyone thought to ask him about it. He had created Cole Property Trust not as charity, but as architecture. Before Mirren's wedding, he had called her into his office, handed her a single folder, and said, "I'm not giving you money, Mirren. I'm giving you ground. No man can take you anywhere if you already own the floor beneath his feet." Ambrose had signed the premarital disclosure the morning of their wedding, 3 full pages detailing Cole Property Trust, its commercial holdings. He had laughed at it, called it old man paperwork, kissed Mirren's forehead, and said he didn't care what was in a trust document. He cared about her. At the time, she had believed him. Now at the door of Caldwell House, with her carry-on in her hand, she understood the difference between a man who loved her without knowing her worth, and a man who had simply never thought to ask. 2 hours before Marvella's announcement, Mirren had been in the estate's private study when Darrow Collective CF Pelham Morse, 49, left a folder on the hall table by accident. The label read, "Cole Property Trust, Annual Lease Review Notice, Q3 Urgent." Pelham had turned white when he walked in and found her beside it. He had reached for it faster than a man with nothing to hide would ever need to. Maren had said nothing. She had seen the header and understood immediately that someone in Ambrose's company had been receiving those notices for months without forwarding them to her. She was the sole trustee of Cole Property Trust. All trust correspondence came to her. This notice had been addressed to Darrow Collective directly and had not been passed along. Someone had decided she did not need to see it. The evening's reception had been called a brand partners gathering. It was Marvella's language for announcing Tindra's permanent place in the family without using the word announcement. When Mirren arrived in the dining room, her chair, the one she had occupied for 9 years, held a small card reading Tindra Wace. Maren's own card had been relocated near the service corridor. Marvella surveyed the reset table with the satisfaction of a woman completing a project she had begun long before tonight. "We are honoring the future of the brand," she told 2 guests who pretended not to notice the chair situation. "Sometimes a company must shed what no longer serves it." Maren did not move the card. She had learned 9 years ago that Marvella fed on visible wounds. Later, carrying water toward the back parlor, Mirren passed the study door and heard Pelham's voice through the gap. He was speaking to Rutland Price 51, the Darrow family attorney, in a tone that was doing its best to sound calm. "If the lease renewal goes directly to Mirren, we cannot hide the subletting income," Pelham said. "The trust rate is $4,200 per month per property. We've been subletting the rear commercial spaces at $9,000 each. That's..." Rutland's voice cut through. Then make sure she signs before she asks questions. Marin stood in the corridor with 2 water glasses and the slow, clarifying weight of what she had just heard. Her father had charged Ambrose's company below market rates as a private generosity, pricing that had allowed Darrow Collective to open 4 flagship locations without the capital most brands spent years accumulating. And Ambrose's team had been subletting the rear commercial spaces for more than double that rate and recording the difference as internal revenue. She did not spill the water. She walked back to the reception and set both glasses on the wrong table because her hands needed something to do that was not shaking. By the time the guests left and Marvella convened the household in the foyer, Mirren already understood the shape of what was coming. "The estate trust has determined," Rutland said, in the tone lawyers used when cruelty needed to sound procedural, "that your continued presence at Caldwell House creates instability for the family's financial interests. As controlling trustee, Marvella Darrow exercises her right to request that you vacate the premises tonight." Marvella held out her open palm. Marin placed the key fob in it without looking at her. She looked at Tindra and the brooch. She looked at Ambrose, who was studying the floor with the focus of a man trying not to witness what he had decided. 9 years, Mirren said, and you chose an audience for it. Ambrose said, "Don't make it sentimental. You never understood what this company actually cost." Nance Pruett, 59, the estate's senior housekeeper and the woman who had placed hot coffee on Mirren's desk every morning for 9 years without being asked, appeared at the base of the staircase. Her face was composed and her jaw was tight. When Rutland instructed the staff to retrieve Mirren's belongings, Nance said quietly, "Mrs. Darrow can manage her own things." No one argued with her. Brecon Foyle, 63, the estate's property manager and the person who had known Garner Cole before Ambrose had ever heard of the family, met Mirren near the side door with her bag. He pressed a folded note into her coat pocket without looking at her. "East Records room," he said. "Second shelf. I have my own key and my phone has storage." Then the door closed and Caldwell House glowed behind her while rain covered everything. The settlement arrived at the hotel before Mirren had taken off her coat. She opened it on the small desk with her father's reading glasses on the bridge of her nose, the ones she kept in her bag, and read the whole thing once, straight through, before she went back to page 4. The language was designed to be polite. It achieved the opposite. She was to waive all interest in Darrow Collective, sign a confidentiality agreement, accept a transitional payment, make no contact with company employees, request no financial records, and then near the bottom of the 4th page, wife acknowledges that she holds no direct or indirect beneficial interest in any commercial real estate currently leased to or occupied by Darrow Collective LLC or its subsidiaries, and waives all right to negotiate, modify, or challenge any such leasing arrangements in perpetuity. She read it twice, then a third time. Nobody put that sentence in a divorce settlement by accident. That sentence was fear wearing a notary's stamp. She called Sidra Oakes, 48, the litigation attorney her father had used for 20 years. Sidra arrived 40 minutes later with a legal pad and no expression that suggested she was surprised to be there. She read the settlement twice, set it down and placed one finger on the property clause. "This is not a divorce agreement," Sidra said. "This is a confession of panic written in 11-point font." Marin told her everything: the premarital disclosure, Cole Property Trust, the 4 flagship leases, the overheard conversation, the intercepted lease notice. Sidra did not move while she listened. When Marin finished, Sidra picked up her pen. "They needed you out before the annual renewal triggered your trustee review. If you had received that notice properly, you would have seen the subletting immediately. They filed the divorce to move faster than the calendar." She paused. "How far below market was your father's rate?" "About half, across all 4 locations." "And the subletting?" "More than double the trust rate per space." The pen tapped the table once. "Then we don't respond to the settlement. We request everything." Brecon had been thorough. By the following morning, Mirren's phone held photographs of 9 years of estate records. Maintenance ledgers, payroll shortfall notes in her own handwriting, covered through Cole family accounts, trust correspondence that had been redirected without her authorization, and a folder labeled Brand Environment. Tindra Waste interior containing receipts for a private apartment furnished on Darrow Collective's operating budget, a wardrobe account coded as Creative Director Visual Alignment, 3 international flights listed under Brand Immersion Travel, and a jewelry purchase, including the pearl and gold brooch Tindra had worn down the staircase, entered in the books as partner gift, press event. Nance's contribution arrived the next day. She had photographed two things first: payroll reports from 4 separate years, when Darrow Collective had nearly missed staff payments, each marked with a note in Mirren's handwriting reading covered from Cole personal account. Do not log as company liability. Second, text exchange between Marvella and Rutland from 6 weeks prior. Marvella had written, "Make sure the property clause is in the settlement. If she signs it, the trust question dies with it." Rutland had replied, "She'll sign, she thinks the trust is just old paperwork." Mirren looked at that exchange for a long time. Her father had always said that a person who deceived others always assumed everyone else was as careless as they were. It was the liar's most consistent blind spot. Sidra issued a preservation notice before noon: company records, estate communications, lease applications, subletting contracts, internal financial authorizations, everything. If Darrow Collective deleted a single document after receiving the notice, that became its own separate problem. The mediation 3 days later was supposed to be a formality. Ambrose arrived with Rutland, Pelham and Tindra, who had no legal reason to be there and every personal reason to stay visible. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Mirren, this is already decided. Don't embarrass yourself by prolonging it." Marvella, seated beside him, looked across the table without blinking. "Sign today. We'll allow you to retrieve whatever personal items remain at the estate." Tindra touched the space at her collar where the brooch had been. She had left it at home. Sidra pushed the settlement back toward Rutland without touching the cover page. "My client declines." Ambrose's jaw tightened. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Sidra's voice did not change. "One question. Why does a personal divorce settlement contain a perpetual leasing waiver for commercial real estate?" Pelham's face shifted. Rutland answered too quickly. "Standard asset protection language." Mirren looked at Pelham. He looked at the table. Every answer being given on that side of the room was a door closing behind someone. Then Sidra said, "You won't object to including all Cole Property Trust correspondence in discovery." Ambrose stood. "You are not turning my company into a divorce proceeding." Mirren looked at him steadily. "You did that when you put my trust in the settlement." The annual lease renewal was scheduled for the following Thursday. Ambrose had requested an in-person meeting at Cole Property Group's downtown offices, expecting to negotiate a long-term extension with whoever administered the trust. His team had prepared talking points. Pelham brought occupancy projections. Rutland carried a proposed lease amendment. They walked in believing they were the ones who had something to offer. Ambrose entered the conference room like a man who had never seriously considered that the floor might not hold. Yolanda Ferris, 52, Cole Property Group's senior leasing director, stood when they entered. Beside her was outside counsel engaged to oversee the trust's renewal process. The room was cold and orderly and full of the particular silence that gathers when records have been read carefully by people who know what they are looking at. Then the door opened a second time. Mirren walked in. The room changed before she spoke. Every Cole Property executive stood. Yolanda looked at her with formal, uncomplicated respect and said, "Good morning, Miss Cole. Thank you for joining us." Ambrose turned slowly. The easy confidence left his face first, then the color. Pelham set his folder down and did not pick it up again. Rutland's hand moved toward his bag. Outside counsel looked at him and shook her head once. Ambrose said very carefully, "What is this?" Mirren sat at the head of the table. Yolanda opened the file. Cole Property Trust holds the ground leases for all 4 of Darrow Collective's flagship commercial properties in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami. The trust's sole beneficiary and acting trustee is Mirren Cole, formerly Cole Darrow. Given that the current leaseholder is party to active divorce proceedings with the trustee, outside counsel has been brought in to ensure this renewal process is conflict-screened and properly documented. Ambrose looked at Mirren with an expression she recognized as the specific disbelief of a person who had never bothered to be curious and was now discovering what incuriosity cost. "You never told me." "You signed the disclosure the morning we got married," she said. "You called it old man paperwork and moved on. That was your choice." Her voice stayed level. "You made it 9 years ago." Yolanda continued. Cole Property Trust Compliance Review has additionally identified subletting of rear commercial spaces at rates inconsistent with the lease agreement's terms. The agreement expressly prohibits subletting without written trustee approval. That approval was never requested. The subletting income collected over that period is subject to full recovery under the lease terms. Pelham closed his eyes. Outside counsel spoke for the record. Cole Property Trust will not renew the current agreements under existing terms. Darrow Collective has 60 days to cure outstanding lease violations, repay unauthorized subletting proceeds, and demonstrate adequate financial standing for renegotiated terms. Failure to cure within that period results in lease termination across all 4 properties simultaneously. Ambrose pushed back from the table. If you terminate, the company can't operate. You'd be destroying everything. Merrin looked at him. You were destroying it quietly for years. I just stopped doing the part that kept it quiet. Darrow Collective did not survive 60 days. It did not survive 30. Without the below-market flagship leases, operating costs tripled before the first billing cycle ended. 2 investors withdrew when the subletting records entered the discovery file. A third received correspondence from Cole Property Trust's attorneys and chose not to wait for the outcome. Pelham cooperated with the financial review to reduce his personal exposure. Rutland resigned from representing the Darrow family before the month ended. Ambrose filed for Chapter 11 with personal guarantees that made the company's collapse inseparable from his own. Tindra gave a statement through her own attorney. She said Ambrose had told her all benefits were properly approved. When the invoices showed otherwise, she returned what could be returned and stopped returning Ambrose's calls. The pearl and gold brooch arrived at Sidra's office in a padded envelope. Sidra signed for it without comment and returned it to Mirren the same afternoon. Marvella moved out of Caldwell House when the estate trust's financial entanglement with Darrow Collective triggered a creditor review. The property she had wielded like a weapon went under court-supervised asset management while attorneys worked through the overlap between family holdings and company liabilities. She had once held Mirren's key fob like a trophy. Now strangers catalogued the silver. Mirren returned to Caldwell House once, and only because the receiver needed her signature to release back wages owed to 6 estate staff members who had remained through the company's unraveling. She brought the checks herself. The front hall looked smaller than she remembered. The chandelier was the same. The staircase curved the same way. But the house had stopped belonging to anyone in particular, and that changed everything about how it felt to stand inside it. Nance met her near the entrance. "Mrs. Cole," she said. The name adjustment had already happened. Brecken stood near the hall table, the same table where Rutland had once placed the settlement folder, the same place Marvella had held the key fob like it meant something permanent. He said, "Most of the staff held on as long as they did because they knew you'd make sure they were paid properly." They said as much when the receiver asked. Merrin looked at the staircase once. She saw it the way it had been that night. Tindra coming down, Marvella with the key fob, Ambrose with his eyes on the floor. Then she saw the conference room at Cole Property Group and Yolanda standing, and Ambrose's face when the floor finally gave out beneath everything he had assumed was permanent. She touched the newel post once, not with longing, more the way you closed a door you had spent too long standing outside. Months later, Mirren reopened 2 of the 4 flagship properties under new tenants, local design collectives with real financial standing and straightforward lease terms negotiated at fair rates. She ran the renewal meetings herself. No speeches, no press. Cole Property Group issued a brief statement that mentioned none of what had happened and all of what was planned. Nance took a building services coordination role at the New York location and started the same week she was asked. Brecken consulted on the Chicago renovation and submitted a bill for his time for the first time in his professional life. Merrin paid it the same day it arrived and added a note that said only, "Thank you for the records." One evening, long after the Cole property offices had emptied out, Merrin sat at her father's desk, the same desk she used now, in the same office where Garner Cole had once handed her a folder and told her he was giving her ground, not money. The city outside the windows was doing what cities did, moving without stopping, indifferent and alive. She placed her father's reading glasses on the desk, beside the trust documents, the same glasses she had worn in the hotel room when she read the settlement clause for the 3rd time. The clause designed to make her disappear before she understood what she held. She thought about the moment early in their marriage when she had almost told Ambrose the full truth about Cole Property Trust. A dinner conversation that ended with him saying something small and certain about women who thought owning things made them significant. She had been about to speak. She had decided against it, and then she had watched instead. Watched for 9 years, the way her father had taught her, waiting to understand what a man respected before she showed him what she owned. Ambrose had not disappointed her. That was not a comfort. It was simply a fact that had finally finished being useful. She turned off the desk lamp and locked the office door. Outside, the street was ordinary and real and unhurried, and Mirren Cole walked into it without looking back. not because there was nothing behind her, but because she had already seen everything she needed to see, and the ground beneath her feet was finally, completely her own. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Broken Oath Tales and comment standing ground below. Because loyalty was never meant to be mistaken for ignorance, and some women were powerful all along. The betrayal only made sure everyone else found out.